Well, welcome everyone. I'm Dee Lanier and flanked with some wonderful people. Got Matt Miller, Dr. Micah Shippee, Dr. Monica Burns. Really excited to have you here. Well, I think we would all agree that classrooms have changed a lot in the last decade, especially over the last couple years even. So today we're talking about what some of those changes are and some of those changes that are coming, emerging tech, if you will. We'll also definitely talk about how we can ensure that technology is inclusive for all and accessible for all to use in the classroom. All right, great. Let's jump in and talk about the current state of education. Yeah, so Monica, what are some of the trends that you're seeing in technology in the classrooms today?
Well, so much has changed in the past decade and very much so in the past few years. And one thing that I'm seeing when talking with educators in classrooms is the curation of resources. So this ability to go out, find different great video clips, podcast episodes, you name it, and then turn that into creative experiences for students where they can make their own artifacts of learning that mirror the kind of content they consume.
You're talking about like creativity in the classroom, right? I'm really interested, Dr. Micah Shippee, in some of your thoughts around, decisions that are made and how those decisions are made concerning technology. I have a couple that I'm always thinking about, right? Schools are oftentimes just thinking, is it cost effective? And if it's cost effective and it's capable of what we wanted to do, then good. And I'm like, can we ask a couple more questions? Like, is it cross-platform? Is it collaborative? Some of the things that really ensure that all kids have access to it and have fun with it. So what are your thoughts?
I think traditionally in education, we've often thought of technology as, do we have the funds for the technology? If so, okay, we'll buy it, put it in the classroom, and they will go forth and change the world. And we have to really change our mindset and start to think about professional development services that can really help to shift practice for the positive. So instead of thinking of, here's hardware and oh, by the way, it comes with training, we really should think it the other way around. Perhaps it's here's training that happens to come with hardware, and put the teaching and learning first, because that's where the real meaning making is going to happen in the classrooms.
I think to add to that, the teacher's voice needs to be involved in that too. A lot of times those decisions get made kind of up at the top, and then those trickle down in the classroom, and the teacher's just kind of left going, well, what am I supposed to do with this thing? But if you have teacher voice involved in it, but also the teachers can see the vision on why it's there and how it's built into instruction, like you kind of have to weave all of those voices together to make really good decisions.
We've all seen that, right? Where sometimes it's actually from the grassroots level, it's the teachers that really create a buzz around certain applications, certain tools, and eventually maybe the decision makers catch on and they're like, oh, you would like this? And we're like, yes, we would like this. Can you open it up for us? Can you buy his licenses for us? Could you purchase this for us? And so I think it's a both and for sure. Monica, you have any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, when it comes to just these conversations around what's going to matter the most in classrooms, this intentionality, right, the decision making of how we're going to use these great resources, that's something that I know I've seen so much more of in the past few years now that new technology is in the hands of so many more students.
Without a doubt. We got to talk about equity in all of this, right? Because there's all of this technology, there's emerging tech, right? There's the bleeding edge, cutting edge stuff that's coming, and there's some schools that have been experimenting with lots of technology, like AR, VR comes to mind. Obviously, we have AI, really at our heels in many ways, and then you have other schools that they're really still wrestling with utilizing digital worksheets and using old teaching practices, but with technology. Like, how do we change that? How do we change that reality so that more schools are adopting technology in ways that are really meaningful for the students?
I'll say, I think one of the most powerful ways for some of those good practices to catch fire is what's happening in the classroom next door to you. What's happening in the classroom down the hall. When you start to see other teachers, whenever teachers start to see other teachers using it in good and meaningful ways, it does a couple of things. One, they start to realize, oh, these are the apps, this is the technology that all of us have access to. And B, they start to go, well, if that teacher over there is doing it, like, that's my colleague in my own school, like, I could do that, and then that's what really starts to take off. So, sometimes we think of professional development as, oh, we need to, bring people in, we need to go with this big program. Sometimes the best professional development is just right next door in the next classroom.
Shout out to pineapple charts, right? But Micah, I'm curious more of your thoughts around the professional development piece, because I'm thinking of, well, what about the school that does not have, several great examples, because unfortunately that school and many of the personnel have not been exposed to various ways to use that technology more meaningfully. How do we change that?
I think we've seen a lot of online platforms that have been used for social entertainment purposes that teachers are gravitating towards because we're looking for a place to have a conversation. In some of those places, they've become increasingly toxic. So the onus is on us to provide communities, both in person and virtual, that will provide teachers with a safe space to have conversations that can, again, help us meaningfully shift practice.
Monica.
Yeah, when it comes to anchoring professional development decisions, one way to think about things is what's adjacent to the technology that we have access to. So perhaps we're very committed to a big idea like differentiated instruction. Well, now we can talk about how these tech resources that we have can help us find supplemental resources that are just right for a student. Or perhaps we're committed to formative assessment routines that meet the needs of every learner. Well, now we can go and find some tools that use voice or video and really help us check for understanding, which has always been the core mission, but now we can just do it with a different level of effectiveness.
That's awesome. So, we can talk about effectiveness, and I think every person here has a lot to say about, defining what is effective, what's more effective, how we can improve, right? Student outcome, teacher practice. I'm also very curious about efficiency, right? Like, where's that tension between effectiveness and efficiency, and how do we make sure that we're doing right by the kids?
I think they can kind of go together to some extent. There are a lot of practices that teachers have done before that eat up an awful lot of their time. I know a lot of times whenever I work with teachers, they say that the one resource that they wish that they had more of was time. And so, when we bring technology into the mix, it's naturally going to make some things more efficient. It's not the cure-all, it's not like the solution, so to speak, but it does buy them back some of those precious minutes that then they can go allocate to the things that teachers are born to do, that they love to do, building relationships with students and getting to know exactly what they need and personalizing education and, giving some of that like one-on-one feedback. That's the kind of stuff that they might not be able to do if technology doesn't help them to be a little bit more efficient. So some of the, auto grading stuff gives immediate feedback, which is a best practice. Some of the things that, some of those routine menial tasks that teachers have been stuck in for so long, like if you liberate them from some of those tasks, all of a sudden they have more time to be able to do what they were born to do.
I almost, or you tell me if this is a good summary. So certain things that technology provides for efficiency purposes allows for the teacher to do the things that are more effective, right?
Exactly.
They can push in to a small group. They can check in on a student. They can roam the classroom versus being tied to the front. I know that's a passion point of yours, Micah.
Yeah, I would also add, it's a bit silly, but I recall shifting my own classroom practice from pen and paper to simply digital. And I actually calculated how much time I was spending during the school year standing at the photocopy machine. Oh. And when I went paperless, I saved myself, I kid you not, 42 hours every school year.
You literally calculated
42
this.
hours of standing at the machine.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some time back. It's a free gift.
Yeah. Yeah. Let alone all of the finances that you help save, right? Right. Kind of on that point, speaking of finances, I'm curious, Monica, what are your thoughts around ensuring that we're doing some of these things in schools that have not traditionally had access to them, for various reasons, but most especially thinking around just financial inequities that exist within schools. Some having great tech, some having little to no tech, some having great exposure to personal learning networks, to professional development opportunities, those having very little to none. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's easy to think that every student knows what to do when you put a device in their hand, but we know that students all across the country and different parts of the world have had very different experiences both inside and outside of the classroom when it comes to navigating digital spaces. So when I think about the particular struggles a classroom, a school, a district might have with making sure these experiences are equitable for everyone, I really come back to this quality use case. Right? What is a quality use of technology? How can we be intentional when we're introducing devices? And sometimes that's just in the context, right? Not on its own, right? Because this is the tech time, but within the context of all the great teaching and learning that's already happening in a classroom.
There's a lot of really great learning opportunities that come out of that, where a teacher is trying something new in front of their students, and the students get to see an adult struggle and try something new. I think of it as agency, and we're providing them access to agency, access to our stick-to-itiveness, our rigor, and seeing an adult actually struggle through for an end result that might be a fail. There's a lesson there.
And sometimes that's the best lesson we can give them, right? I mean, we focus so much of our teaching toward the curriculum, but that's something that transfers to life, right? Being able to see how someone has actually taken an issue, taken a breath, smiled, and said, okay, let's come up with a solution to this, and not to freak out about it. Like that's something that we can really leave our students, to kind of continue on this conversation about, equity issues. There's that whole financial side of it too, right? I know, Dee, you've got strong feelings about that.
I have very strong feelings about that, having worked in, schools that did not have as many resources as others. Oftentimes, I think the onus is put on the teacher to go find, right, and to be an extra, and not consider that in certain settings, that's just part of their ethos. That's just what happens there. They have a personal learning network. People are sharing resources. People are being sent to conferences, and in certain settings, that's not the norm at all. And so it really comes down to some of the decision makers really putting a lot of financial resources there, but also considering just the opportunity. This is opportunity for professionals to grow in their profession, and so them being connected to other schools, other thought leaders, other opportunities to utilize technology so that the students are benefiting. And that oftentimes also could include, having a coach, right? Having professional development that's accessible to them, whether it's in-house or within the district, as well as virtual. So, yeah, lots of thoughts, but I think that the investment is made on the teachers, then it will reach the students.
Yeah, and when you talk about the investment on professional development to the teachers, that doesn't always have to be a financial investment, does it? Because there are tons of really good resources out there. You've got social networks of teachers where they can reach out to each other and throw ideas around. You've got lots of free resources that are out there. Go do a search online, go watch some videos, and really the access is out there to anybody who wants to go look for it, who wants to learn.
Yeah, it makes me think about, you were saying earlier, like the best gift you can give to teachers is time, and think about some of the ways in which students are learning and sharing and showcasing their learning in a diversity of ways. What if we gave teachers time? Novel thought, right? What if that Wednesday after school professional development was a teacher looking at some of those curated resources and really developing their thoughts from these various places versus it being an in-service that's directed towards them, didactic teaching that's actually opposite of how you want them to teach, like all of those sort of things. Give them a little bit of time, give them resources in the form of these are places that you can go, and then allow them to share their learning, right? That'd be really cool. So maybe one last point, if we can really talk about it, because I feel like we've danced around it. We've talked a lot about efficiency, obviously around effectiveness, and we've talked a little bit about creativity in a classroom. Let's go there. Like, okay, the emerging tech, it's coming and it's continuing to come. How do we make sure that we really amplify the voices of students in what they're learning?
Well, we know that students are consumers, right? They watch, they listen, they read lots of digital resources, and we have a really unique opportunity to help them become creators of content that mirror the types of pieces that they consume. So asking students, what do you love to listen to? What do you like to watch? What is the best way you could teach someone else this thing that we've learned all together? The creative opportunities with digital tools, go beyond just the authentic audience or that authentic artifact of learning to really giving kids choice in the best way to share what it is that they've learned.
And if we want learning to be authentic, if we want it to be relevant to their cultures and their lived experience, that's something that kind of scales all the way across the board. We give them opportunities for learning to kind of mirror, just like you said, the things that they love outside of the classroom. All of a sudden you get that into the classroom and there's that bridge together, but then that also helps them to see how learning transfers in the real world too, right? Like, this doesn't have to be something that's siloed just in the classroom, just in the school. It's something that can really open up doors to them for the future, for jobs and anything that they do in their lives.
It's interesting to really think about decentralizing the focus of where the content and the learning comes from in a classroom. Mm-hmm. So empowering student voice with voice and choice and allowing them to use whatever mediums they're comfortable with and then relate that knowledge to their classmates is really a powerful thing to do. But when we decentralize like that, it takes away from how many of us were trained as educators. It takes away that sage on the stage and it puts us as a guide on the side. And so that shift, I'm wondering what you all think about how we navigate that shift or help others navigate that shift in the classroom.
It can be challenging to step away or to give that space. One thing I love both, during my time as a classroom teacher and working with teachers is thinking about how to give great examples, how to give non-exemplars too, how to have a conversation about where we're heading, what can I do to support you on that road to get there, on that journey, without completely taking the reins, right, during that creative journey. So the more that someone can rely on templates, examples, non-examples or non-exemplars, and have a discussion throughout that process, I think is really powerful to set up student creators for success.
And it's just like Monica said, it's a delicate balance, isn't it? And if you're trying to decentralize it, like you said, Micah, that's counter to what a lot of us have done before. And so sometimes just taking that first small step, just like a little bitty step in that direction, especially for those teachers that are so comfortable with the way that they may have taught for years, for decades maybe. Just taking that first step of, okay, I'm going to decentralize a little bit. I'm going to step a little more to the side, just a little bit. And that one little step is a meaningful step and it can lead to other ones. So really sometimes just a teeny tiny step is really that, that first progression towards opening things up and giving students a little bit more control.
Yeah, no doubt. So we have emerging tech, which is creating opportunities for teachers and for students to learn different, right? And it also brings up more questions, right? Think about the ethics of certain technology. I also think about a big lingering question oftentimes, like we're gonna move away from just doing worksheets, multiple choice, and written essays, and we're gonna give students student expression and allow them to create videos and visual artwork and all of these other things. That's cool, but how do I grade it? Right? How do I grade that? How do I assess that? And a word that I've heard used a lot is group discussion, right? Let's have a conversation. And that also, I think, includes with the students themselves, right? Like, how do we create collaborative rubrics to evaluate these things that are emerging, right? Like, we've not mastered them. We've not mastered these tools, we've not mastered these techniques, and so we can't claim to have mastery over how do we assess mastery, right? But we can learn together, I would think.
I think part of it is that our minds, traditionally, we focus on the end product and grading an end product, that portfolio-driven, what does the final piece of art look like? What does the artifact look like at the end? And really what's missing from that mindset is the process, which is far more important. Grading how students self-reflect on their own narratives. How do they self-edit? How are they showing where the information originates? Citing their work. It's so profound, it's so important. how do they, even in a 360 way, how do they in a group reflect on their own contribution to the group? How do their classmates reflect on their contribution to the group? And then how does the teacher reflect on that contribution? And therefore all voices are really brought into this story of getting to an end product.
Yeah, we often think about celebrating that final piece, but how can we really move through to have those touch points that we've built in strategically to say, this is when I'm going to pause and really take the moment to have this conversation with my group of students.
And when it comes to assessment too, I think the process needs to be a part of that as well. For so long, think of the standard math worksheet and you have the final answers and maybe you have a little bit of the work, but what if you take like one problem and do a deep dive and walk your way through the process, talk through, here's why I did what I did. Like that starts to open the teacher up to understand what's going on in the student's head, but it also empowers the student to think back, the reflective, you were just talking about reflection, it's that reflective process of looking back over, why did I do what I did? Let me stop for a second and look at my steps and see if this all makes sense. Like that's all a big piece of it that's crucial.
And how another student may also hear that reflection and say, ooh, I think I know what you were doing, but, right, and that co-learning happen, within a classroom with students also, and sometimes the teacher can be amazed, oh, wait a minute, you understood what she was thinking. I didn't. I understand now. Now I can actually help in this piece because now you've actually translated for me what was going on here.
Yeah, and it's like whenever you have a student explain something, sometimes that just unlocks the concept to another student, and all of a sudden the teacher's sitting there going, I just explained that. Why didn't it? But it makes sense. And that's where, it goes back to that decentralizing idea. Like if you're willing to step out of the front of the classroom and give that stage to somebody else, that could be the key that unlocks it sometimes.
Oh goodness. Well, this conversation, it needs to continue, right? Like not only amongst us, but all educators everywhere continuing to just have dialogue about how we are utilizing technology and some of its use cases, how are we overcoming challenges, and how do we really effectively bring it in so that students are learning best. So thank you so much for this time, and let's keep it going if you all are all right with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Thank you all.
Thanks, Dee.